With any job application, your motivation letter is an extremely important document when it comes to whether you get an invitation to a job interview or not. I remember very well how I sent out my first job applications and how disappointed I was by the responses that I got. At that time, I thought my applications were really good. I had good grades, I had some first work experience both abroad and in my home country, and I put a lot of effort in my application. Up to this day, I remember being so frustrated because none of my applications at the time were successful. If I look back on those applications now, it is pretty obvious to me why I never got any of the jobs that I applied for. Although my CV at the time was probably okay, my motivation letters were horrible. They were not just bad, they were horrible. And honestly, this is not even a big surprise because I was never taught or instructed how to write a motivation letter, especially not at school. I had no idea what was important and what I should write in there. So what I did is that I took a random template that I found somewhere on the internet and adjusted it just a little bit and sent it out for all the jobs that I applied for. The same one to every single job. Unsurprisingly, this did not work. Since then, more than 10 years have passed and I have both written and read a lot of motivation letters and I have learned a lot. And it seems to have paid out because the last time I was looking for a job, which is now a little bit over a year ago, I got invited to a job interview every single time I sent out an application. I believe that this was on one hand due to the fact that I applied to jobs that were a pretty good fit to me, but on the other hand, due to the fact that I learned how to write a great motivation letter. In today's video, I'm going to share all of my knowledge about motivation letters with you, and hopefully my tips will make the application process a little easier for you and help you to get the next job that you want. Before we get started, I just want to welcome you back quickly. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Laura. I'm an attorney working in Switzerland, and in my videos I would like to share all sort of knowledge regarding law, career and finance that I have learned in my career so far and that I wish I knew way earlier. For now, let's look at how to get your motivation letter ready. Let's start at the beginning and let me show you what a motivation letter should more or less look like. As you can see on this example, you want to indicate your name and address at the top of the page so that any reader can easily see this information. A little further down, you write down the address of where you want to apply. In this example, let's just imagine we want to apply to the Supreme Court of the United States. So we name the court and put its address there. Next, we write down the place and date where and when we wrote our motivation letter. For example, in New York on July 15th, 2023. The next step is the title of our application, which we write in bold letters to make it very clear what our motivation letter is about. The title is called Application As and the position we're applying for. For instance, a secretary, a security guard, or a gardener. The next element in our title is the reference number, which is indicated in the job posting or in the job advertisement that you saw. It is really important that you mention this number in the title of your application because sometimes a company offers several jobs that are similar and it is really important for them to know which job you are applying for. The last part we need to think about before we get to the content of our motivation letter is who to address. And here I really recommend you to try to find out who is going to read your application, because it is a lot more personal if you write down Dear Mr. Miller, for instance, or Dear Mrs. Miller, compared to Dear Sir or Madam. So make sure to do your homework and find out who to address. Now that all this is done, let's get to the interesting part of the motivation letter, which is the content. And first things first, don't write too much. Make sure that your motivation letter is no longer than 1 page, 1.5 pages max. If it's longer than that, find out what information you can delete. We'll get to that in just a second. Your goal is to keep your motivation letter short and only put relevant information in there that is beneficial to you. Focus on writing short and clear sentences rather than long ones that sound unnecessarily complicated. You also want to make sure you have a clear structure in your motivation letter, as we see in this example here. When it comes to writing your motivation letter, you want to make sure that pretty much everything you write answers one of the following 2 questions. Number 1, why do you want the job? And number 2, why do they want you? To do that, what I do and what I would recommend you to do is to imagine sitting at the other end of the table. Ask yourself, what is your future employer looking for? What does he want? Basically, what you want to do here is you want to imagine reading your application through his or her eyes. Not only do you want to let your future employer know why you want the job, you also want to let him know why he wants you. This is an aspect that often gets forgotten in motivation letters or that people don't focus on enough. You should also see your application process as something you want to sell. You want to sell your knowledge, your talent, your skills, and your motivation, and therefore you need to point them out enough. So far so good, but what should you actually write at the beginning of your motivation letter? What many people are doing, and what I also did many years ago, is that they start their motivation letter with something like this. With this letter, I would like to apply for the job as a secretary. As I saw on the internet recently, you are looking for a secretary. I'm interested in the job you posted. My name is, and I'm currently looking for a job. You kind of get the idea with these examples. And if you're now wondering, well, what's wrong with them? Ask yourself, what information does your employer get from that? The answer is simple, none. Because your employer read the title of your application. He knows that you want to apply for the job as a secretary, and he can probably also figure out that you found out about it on the internet. Besides that, another 10 motivation letters that he or she just read started just like that. As I just told you, you only want to write 1 to 1.5 pages max, and you only want to put relevant information there. The introduction sentences I just showed you are not relevant. Let me give you an example of how you can start your motivation letter instead. 7 years ago, I started working as a secretary for a court of law. Until this day, this job gives me great pleasure because it allows me to come into contact with a variety of different people. I also find it very exciting to keep gaining new insights into the legal system. The day-to-day work as a court secretary is diverse, interesting and instructive, which is why I would like to continue this profession in the future with the Supreme Court. Example number 2. The work as a secretary requires good organization, excellent language and writing skills, as well as a friendly approach to clients. It also requires patience, a hands-on mentality, and the ability to perform tasks carefully and consciously. For example, when drafting documents. I have acquired all these qualities in the course of my career, which is why I think I am the ideal candidate for the position you are advertising. Do you see a difference compared to the previous introductions to a motivation letter I showed you? I hope so. If you start your motivation letter similar to the examples I showed you, you have the chance to already point out a variety of skills and good characteristics that you have. The point is that you want to start your motivation letter in a way that catches the interest of the person reading it. Because normally there is a lot of letters to be reviewed and you want yours to be the one to stand out. You want to spark some interest about you as a person and make sure that your employer wants to read and know more about you and finally meet you in person. Once you've written the introduction to your motivation letter, it is part for the next section. What I normally do here is that I explain why I am interested in the job that I applied for. In our example with the secretary, I would therefore probably write something similar to this. After years of working at a smaller court of law, I would like to work as a secretary for a higher court in the future and thus open a new chapter in my professional career. Obviously, your motives why you apply to a certain job are very personal and there is no general formula to write down. It all just depends on your personal motivation. As a next step, you want to add why the job that you applied for is exactly what you're looking for. If we go back to our example with the secretary, this means more or less the following. The position as secretary with the Supreme Court of the United States you advertised therefore corresponds exactly to the idea of my future workplace. After that, you explain why this is the case. What tasks do you like about the job you're applying to? What makes it interesting to you? A trick that I have learned here is to always match this section of my application to the job advertisement or to the job posting that I saw online. To be able to do that, I always save a copy of the job advertisement either in a digital version or as a print. If you do this, you can now check what tasks are required and either you write that you're interested in doing them or you write down that you've already done them in the past. This is what I call keyword matching. It means that you pick out specifications or keywords from the job advertisement that you saw and you use the exact same wording in your motivation letter. Let's look at a job advertisement for secretaries here to give you an example of what those keywords could be. In this advertisement, there is a section where the company indicates exactly what they are looking for. So easy enough to find out what you want to mention in your motivation letter. Here you could repeat the terms strong written and oral communication skills, for example, or you mentioned that you have a bachelor's in international management or that you have several years of experience in an administrative role. Especially if a computer is reviewing your application first, it is very important to use these same keywords to succeed with your application. Another mistake that I made all the time when writing motivation letters is that I wrote down my whole CV in them. I wrote down which schools I visited, which classes I took, etc., etc. But the problem with that is all of this information can already be found in your CV, which is normally reviewed before your motivation letter. Therefore, instead of repeating yourself, focus on answering the two questions we talked about. Why do you want the job and why do they want you? This also means that you can explain why you chose to go to a certain school or why you chose to take certain classes at your school, for instance. Just make sure you provide new information that is not the exact same as in your CV. Finally, in the last bigger section of your motivation letter, you really want to express your motivation and your excitement for the job that you're applying for. Because at the end of the day, every employer wants employees who are motivated and happy with their job and who enjoy their work. Also, if you have other positive characteristics or special abilities that you have not mentioned yet, you should do it now. To give you an example again, the final section of your motivation letter could be something like this. In addition to my professional qualifications, I am personally distinguished in particular by my ability to work in a team, a high level of motivation, and my multilingualism. I pursue my profession as a secretary and the associated challenges with verve and enthusiasm on a daily basis. I am therefore convinced that I am ideally suited to fill the position of secretary at the Supreme Court. After that, you're really getting to the end of your motivation letter where you want to write something similar to this. I would be very pleased to meet you in a personal interview to tell you more about me and at the same time learn more about the position you offer. If you want to show some more confidence, you write this instead. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person soon to tell you more about me while learning more about the position you offer. In my opinion, both of these options are perfectly fine. The later one just shows a little bit more confidence, but this is usually not a bad thing in an application process. For a polite ending, I suggest that you thank the people that are reviewing your application because the whole application process is a lot of work for them too. I therefore suggest you write something similar to this. I would like to thank you in advance for your careful review of my application documents and your prompt response. After that, at the very end of your motivation letter, you write sincerely at the place where your signature is gonna go above later. If you have a special title, you can also mention it here. And yes, I would very highly recommend you to print out your motivation letter and sign it nicely and neatly with a pen before you create a PDF file. And yes, although this is an extra step of work, it is important and it shows that you took the effort to do so. While having printed out your motivation letter, you also want to read it again to make sure that there is no mistakes or errors in it, because grammar mistakes or spelling mistakes are an absolute no-go in a motivation letter. Therefore, I don't care how many times you have to read your letter, what spell check app you have to use, or how many people you have to ask to double check your letter for you. Whatever you have to do to make sure that there's no errors and mistakes in it, make sure you do it. Finally, one last but important tip. If you apply to a few different jobs, make sure to adjust and customize your motivation letter every single time. I know that this takes a lot of time and it is a lot of work, but it is very important to do so because your chances of success are going to be a lot higher. When reading an application, you can immediately tell if somebody put some serious effort in it or if it is just part of a mass application. And honestly, the later on takes a lot of time too without getting you any positive result. So you might as well do it right the first time. With this, we're getting to the end of today's video, but I will share a very basic motivation letter template through a link in the video description down below. Although you're going to have to write the text in it yourself, I hope that the template will help you to do so together with the information I shared in this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you found the information I shared with you in this video helpful. If so, I would be really happy if you gave it a thumbs up or if you consider subscribing to my channel. I published one video already that should help you to get your CV ready for your application, and I intend to publish another video very soon with tips and tricks for your job interview. I hope to be talking to you again then. Thank you again guys, take care, and I see you soon.